CNBC Africa spoke to the International Monetary Fund's Deputy Managing Director, that's David Lipton, during his recent visit to Cape Town. And we started off by asking him about his outlook for South Africa, given the inherent risks and in light of the Finance Minister Nene's 2% GDP projection.
Well, South Africa's been a medium growth country, and recently growth slowed down, and you're right, some of it comes from the electricity problem. We see growth being similar range to what you've just mentioned. I think the unfortunate news is that when one looks forward several years, growth looks like it's going to be in the twos rather than the threes or fours, where potential growth in South Africa, I think, was viewed as being 3.5 to 4. It's now viewed as being 2.5 to 3. So there is a really important job here in South Africa of trying to find ways to push the economy onto a higher growth trajectory, more like other emerging market countries.
Is there any kind of an obvious first step that they should take in order to push us in that direction? Perhaps you think the government or private sector may be overlooking?
Well, I don't think I'll say anything that isn't on the agenda right here and now, but clearly the electricity sector problem is very debilitating. It hurts households, everybody who suffers a power outage. It hurts firms, whether it's scheduled or worse, if it's non-scheduled. It's very hard to run a company with that kind of interruption. This won't be an easy problem to solve, but it's solvable, and the government and Eskom together, with perhaps some dialogue and even some help from the private sector, will need to address that. I think beyond that there is a bigger, longer, more complex agenda. How to create more competition and remove impediments that so far have been preventing investment, the growth of businesses, the creation of new small and medium enterprises, and most importantly, the employment of the about 25% of the labor force that's really outside of the economy. It's really outside of the formal economy and doesn't have job prospects. The potential for growth here is much higher if all of those people can be brought into the economy.
You touched on investment there and impediments to investment. Now, I want to ask you about structural reforms in our economy, two concerning aspects in particular, one being the foreign land ownership, which we heard from the minister, which has now been banned in South Africa. The second is the expropriation bill of property and assets, which is now again up for discussion by our government and may be called into law as early as this year. Both of those things are threatening to potential investments. What is your view?
I've not studied those two provisions at all, so I'm not going to speak to them in specific. South Africa has been a foreign direct investment destination, but not a sufficiently attractive one. It is, foreign direct investment has been about 1% of GDP, where in many fast-growing emerging market economies, it's much higher, 3, 4, 5% of GDP. So it is important that South Africa takes steps to make itself a more attractive foreign direct investment destination, because that kind of investment not only brings capital, but it employs people, it brings in new technologies, and strengthens the country.
I just want to move a little bit further out of South Africa, looking at the Sub-Saharan Africa region. Yeah. And I want to ask you, as the IMF, when you're assessing funding weaker sovereigns, what are the things that you look for? What might make you decide on a potential investment?
Well, when we come to Africa, we do several things with the countries of Sub-Saharan Africa. We help countries strengthen their own capacity through our technical assistance programs. Where countries have monetary or fiscal policy problems, we give them advice in the annual policy dialogues that we have with countries. And then if countries run into financial problems, we can provide them with finance alongside of adjustment strategies that they implement. So it's a package of adjustment and finance. So when we're working in a country that has some weakness, we try to go through that process. It's a negotiation process that can lead to our financial support. As you may have seen, we're in the tail end, the very finishing end of a negotiation with Ghana, where we hope we can help Ghana, which has had some difficult times recently, get back on a better track.
Sure. My final question is just on your growth outlook for Sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah.
I know that there are a lot of concerns around economies in the region whose GDP is heavily reliant on resources.
Yes.
What is your view as the IMF?
Countries in Sub-Saharan Africa have had a tremendous most recent 15 years with growth in the 5 to 6 range, some of them higher than 6%. Now, some of those countries have had success because they've exported oil or other commodities, and the high prices of those commodities has been part of their success. But I think much of the success is for other reasons. It's because countries have improved their policies, have strengthened agricultural productivity, a range of improvements that have been made. You're right that the lower oil price and the lower commodity prices will harm some countries. We think growth may slow a bit in Sub-Saharan Africa. I think we're projecting 4.7% average growth in Sub-Saharan Africa. But we don't think that these lower prices will derail growth, but rather will be a challenge, and countries will have to overcome that challenge to return to the higher rates of growth.